Hey everybody, welcome to Leon's Chainsaw Parts and Repair. We're looking at a saw you don't see in the United States all that terribly often. This is a Duramark 16-inch. Now they labeled multiple saws that. There was a VI Super 2 Homelite version that was also labeled a 16-inch. This is of course based on a Super EZ, or more accurately an XL-1 automatic. I think is the closest model. UT number 50173. This is a 1981 model. As best I understand the Homelite Terry serial numbers. And again, this was built by Homelite. But let's go through some of the oddities or differences. Maybe differences is a better way to put it, because this is not exactly the same as a Super EZ. Hence the XL-1 automatic isn't necessarily exactly the same. You can see the hand bracket is set up for a hand guard, but this is a chain brake saw. To the best of my knowledge, this is the only way these Duramarks, that's all they purchased, were chain brake capable saws. The hardware here is Phillips head instead of the hex head that Homelite used in the US models. Same thing on these, on the air filter bracket. Yes, please. Phillips head. So that's minor stuff. That's more major. That's not even drilled for a manual oiler. It's not threaded up here. Nothing is in place there. Nothing at all. So there is no manual oiler option on these. The other oddity is the pickup for the automatic oiler. You know, the later model Super EZs had a hose coming out of the tank right here and came down in. This is the old school style. Only this has the hose coming out of the tank right here, and it's just going back over to a copper line that feeds that oiler. So it's kind of a hybrid between the early system that passed through the crankcase and the later system. So it's kind of interesting. It is an HDC 64 carburetor. That is probably why I own this saw right now. This came from a seller on eBay. Whoever had it originally tried to do some work that didn't work, but I'll get to that in a second. One other important detail: there is no compression release on this. You'll notice that this is the Super XL style throttle lock. None of the linkage. It's not even drilled in the airbox, and that cylinder is plugged. So muffler is a standard US available muffler, an earlier style. Uses the S clutch. That spur drum, I think, might be original. I know that bar is, even though the Duramark logo is worn off. These use a 360 style bar plate, bigger plates, with an S clip here to run the big slot bars. Uses an early style fuel cap. Damn it. That sprays gas at you. That has the retainer. Had to replace the duckbill valve, but you know, that's no big deal. So yeah, it's kind of a mix. And then there's no rubber on the handle. That is factory for this particular model of saw. It's got the rubber grips back here, but they did not put any rubber on that. So what I was talking about in the carburetor, I'd rebuilt it and it would run, but it was loading up bad, flowing an immense amount of fuel. I could turn both adjustment needles all the way closed, and what do you know, it still tried to run. Finally realized the improper circuit plate was in there. When I got it apart, it had the improper gasket, but I didn't catch the circuit plate initially. This feed hole right here is completely in the wrong spot. The proper one is up here, and it's much bigger, but this was bypassing the actual metering that those two screws do. So that was kind of odd. I'm assuming somebody pulled that plate out of a 360, or in Canada it would have been 35 SL, or something else that used an HDC carburetor. Probably the lever broke, and that was the fix. Was to try and swap it into this saw. Well, there are differences. Even though it's the same series of carburetor, there are differences between them. So that didn't work so well. That actually fought me quite some time before I just forced myself to stop and think, hey dummy, something is not right here. I was in and out of it, and I was checking and rechecking things that I knew were right. Now, again, trust your gut. Sometimes it just doesn't lead you wrong sometimes. So anyway, once I got a proper circuit plate in there, which thankfully I had in a boneyard carburetor. I don't have a lot of those around. I was actually kind of sweating that one. I didn't think I was going to come up with anything, because I don't keep a big boneyard around. It's not like some of the old shops that had, you know, literally pallets of saws laying out back. Hey, I live in the city. There's no way in hell I can do that. No room. But I'd like to put this together and do a little test run for you guys. I had it running just a few minutes ago with the proper circuit plate, and I was able to get it tuned. This does have electronic ignition, being an 81 model. It's got the blue coil, which does not appear to have been a problem in this thing. This saw is clean, very clean on the inside. I think half of the wear on the outside is actually just being shuffled around. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that when the carburetor was first rebuilt, that's when all the, you know, incorrect stuff was put in there, and at that point the saw was basically decommissioned. So who knows where it bounced around to. Seller I bought it from, I believe, is out of Vermont. It's either Vermont or New Hampshire, somewhere very close to the Canadian border. Hence a pretty good supply of saws that would normally only be found in Canada. That's kind of cool. Some of the seller's packaging is a little interesting. I mean, this made it here okay, but it was literally cardboard that was wrapped around the saw and taped into place. I mean, you guys have heard my gripes about some of the damage that's happened. I would never in my life ship a saw like that. And it's just asking for bad stuff to happen, but you know, not everybody's had those experiences that I've had, and some people probably just figure, oh, to hell with it. Play the percentages. Alright. That's looking pretty good. This black paint was a high gloss. It definitely loses some of its sheen with age. And I've got some yellow wax on it that hopefully it's going to bring it back nicely enough. Alright, what am I forgetting? Nothing, I think. This would have had a Duramark label out over here, I think on both sides, based on what I've seen, but it's cut at least enough wood to wear that off. Where's that bar? There it is. Back this bar pin off a little bit. This oiler works just fine, I can tell you that. My test running made quite the little mess on the bench. I don't know what chain this is, what brand. It looks very new. The links have an M. Oh, J1. Is that Sabre, maybe? This isn't Homelite's triple raker crap. Similar, but not exactly the same. That might be a Sabre chain. There we go. Not back. Nope, still not far enough back. There's a Homelite Super XL style saw with a chain brake that I think is the biggest one in the so-called Duramark line. I should have looked this up before firing the video up, but I think the department type store, at least that's what we call them here, I think it was the Hudson Trading Company. I don't know if it was Hudson Bay. I honestly can't remember, but it was kind of like our Montgomery Wards when they were in business, that you know, had their own house line of saws. You know, Montgomery, or was it Sears? Craftsman bought a few Homelites for a couple of years. You know, they had the version of the 360 and the 450 that they sold. Same difference. But again, these are their own special paint color. I don't see a lot of evidence that this was red before it was painted black. There was a little tiny bit of red speckling in the airbox itself, but everywhere else, it looks like these would have been produced on a line, an assembly line that was held back and sprayed on, you know, separately from the other Homelite parts. Chain brake for these was a little ungainly, pretty big, but effective. Meguiar's brought back a fair amount of the shine that belongs in this. Just like a car, once red paint scratches, it's gonna show the sins forever. But that's not a bad looking little saw. Let's give it a quick test fire. See if it's still warm enough to start with that choke. That's interesting. Either that band is broken, or there's something I didn't get indexed right. That's okay. I can look into that later. Obviously there's some greasy oil on the muffler that needs to burn off here. You can see it's smoldering a little bit, but sounds like a regular old Super EZ. But it doesn't look exactly like one. Pretty cool.